a service of CNC Worldwide.
The Daily is a service of CNC News and Jib Jab Greetings. I'm Bud Lowell. Your full AccuWeather forecast is on top of your CNC local news pages. Pay close attention to that forecast because it looks like an unprecedented weather event may be affecting all of the Northeast by later this weekend, and it may hit as far west as Buffalo with some unusually heavy rain and high winds. It's because of a combination of the system that brought us the unusual warmth over the Great Lakes region this week and Hurricane Sandy, which is beginning to affect Florida and expected to move very quickly up the Atlantic coast. The National Weather Service doesn't have any high confidence scenarios for just where this storm is heading or how they're likely to mix, but all the scenarios show that Sandy is likely to run into the strong low pressure trough that pulled the unusually warm air over our region. And the interaction between the two is likely to generate what some are already calling Frankenstorm, a powerful storm system for the East Coast, a storm that could turn west across the southern mid-Atlantic states or could move up the coast towards Long Island and New England. If it follows that second track, it could mean unusually heavy, prolonged rains and strong winds as far west as the Rochester area, and even snow for the higher elevations south of Rochester, although if that does happen, it's probably going to be in Pennsylvania, not in New York. Governor Andrew Cuomo has ordered the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services to closely monitor the progress of Hurricane Sandy and prepare for potential storm impacts. Although the storm track is still uncertain, the governor's office says Hurricane Sandy has the potential to affect many parts of New York State with a variety of threats, including heavy rain, high winds, flooding, tornadoes, coastal surges along the Atlantic part of the state, and widespread power outages. Rochester area emergency responders and highway departments began checking their equipment and supplies Thursday night with an eye on what could happen 4 days from now. The governor cautioned New Yorkers to pay close attention to TV and radio for the latest information and especially for alert system messages, EAS messages, that carry local emergency orders. The worst possible scenario, that would be similar to the Great New England Hurricane of 1938, a September storm which turned north and out over the Atlantic, and then it curved west again to hit New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. Without today's satellite imaging and computer models, forecasters of the day lost track of the storm. They expected it to keep moving out over the Atlantic, and they didn't catch when it turned back, so there was no warning until it suddenly hit Long Island in the middle of an unusually warm September afternoon. Cities 30 miles inland were flooded, and more than 600 people who were caught without warning died in that storm. Rochester police and fire crews were busy overnight. A fire at the Manor Parkway Apartments between South and Mount Hope Avenues sent 2 people to the hospital to be treated for smoke inhalation. The fire was reported just after 10 p.m. in one of the 4 buildings in the complex. Everyone evacuated safely except for the 2 who went to the hospital. No word yet on what caused the fire in a first-floor apartment. An hour after that, Rochester police were called to St. Mary's Hospital, where the victim of a stabbing had been dropped off for treatment. Police say the 42-year-old city man was stabbed several times in the torso outside an address near the corner of Jefferson Avenue and Magnolia. They're investigating several leads. Last Friday, former President Bill Clinton visited Rochester to help Congresswoman Louise Slaughter and Kathy Hochul stump for re-election. This Friday, it was Governor Andrew Cuomo and Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy. The governor rallied at Local 13 of the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union on Mount Read Boulevard for Slaughter and Hochul. Cuomo said voters face a stark choice between Republicans and Democrats in the fall. If Republicans win the White House and keep control of the House of Representatives, he says New York's billion-dollar deficit could double or triple. Congresswoman Slaughter spoke for both her and Kathy Hochul, who has laryngitis. Slaughter said both Democrats need to stay in Congress to face down a Republican war against women.
Some of us have been in that war for 40 years, and we thought these things were settled. We had no idea that we'd have to go back and fight for contraception. But Kathy and I need to be there because we're not going to let them take that away from us.
Both Democrats are in tight races against strong Republican challengers, Slaughter against Monroe County Executive Maggie Brooks, and Hochul against businessman and former Erie County exec Chris Collins. For both Democrats, It will depend on how well they can turn out their Democratic supporters in the cities of Rochester and Buffalo, the core of their districts. And two Rochester men who conspired to con local firms out of some $600,000 have been indicted by a federal grand jury on 12 counts of fraud and money laundering. They face up to 20 years in prison and a $500,000 fine each if they're convicted. The U.S. Attorney for Western New York says 45-year-old Kenneth Griffin and 73-year-old Brian Campbell defrauded companies involved in collecting on accounts receivables, what's known as the factoring business. Prosecutor John Field says the two men ran a temp agency. They cooked up more than $600,000 worth of fake accounts, seemingly backed up by fake timesheets and other documentation. Then they sold those accounts to factoring companies who are in business to collect those debts. The factoring companies wired money to a debit card service company, which in turn loaded it onto debit cards that could be used to withdraw cash from ATMs. The loaded debit cards were given to low-level temp agency workers who were instructed to pull the money from the cards until they were empty and then hand the cash over to Griffin. Because the underlying accounts receivable were fakes, the factoring companies were out the money they paid for the account leads. The scheme was unraveled by IRS and FBI agents, plus investigators from the U.S. Postal Service. We'll continue to watch this storm over the weekend, and if you get good video or shots, please send them to us at greasenylive.com. You can post us news happenings and paste pictures into them right on those links at the bottom of the page. And to the left of this player window, links that you can use to check up on these and other stories will update as we learn more. Next news as it happens, updates when necessary. I'm Bud Lowell, CNC News.